Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Free Press Live, the second live stream we've done from a political convention, because we're coming to you live from Chicago. But we have a lot to talk about, and I have to introduce my co-host, my foil, my commie friend, Batya Ungar-Sargon, who is the opinion editor at Newsweek and often frequent guest on our live streams. But we're going to get back to all the other stuff very soon, because Bill Clinton is speaking now, and we have a lot of people that we want to bring on and talk to you about Bill Clinton's speech. So let's watch Bill Clinton, and we'll be right back live with Batya.
Personal vanity I want to assert is I'm still younger than Donald Trump. Last night in what I thought was a very moving series of episodes, we nominated Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And just think about that. Two leaders with all-American but still improbable life stories. It could only happen here. Their careers, after all, started in community courtrooms and classrooms. Two leaders who spent a lifetime getting the good job done. Now, one of the things that I've noticed over my increasingly long life, that a presidential election is unique in several ways. First of all, it's the greatest job interview for the greatest job in the world. Secondly, the Constitution says we, the people, get to do the hiring. And the third thing is that every 4 years, we get to change the requirements for the job. So here's what I'm thinking, because I try to apply this in every election. Will this president take us backward or forward? Will this president give our kids a brighter future? Depends. Will this president bring us together or tear us apart? Will the president increase the peace, security, and stability and freedom that we enjoy and extend it to others as we can? We, the people, we have to make a decision about these kind of questions. And every 4 years, it's a little different, because the people come at the candidates, and they say, as they're saying now, here are our problems, solve them. Here are our opportunities, seize them. Here are our fears, ease them. Here are our dreams, help them come true. A president can answer that call by saying, I'll do my part, but you have to help me. We have to work together. Or you can dodge what needs to be done by dividing, distracting, and diverting us. So in 2024, we got a pretty clear choice, it seems to me. Kamala Harris for the people, and the other guy who's proved even more than the first go around that he's about me, myself, and I. I know which one I like better for our country. Kamala Harris will work to solve our problems, seize our opportunities, ease our fears, and make sure every single American, however they vote, has a chance to chase their dreams. You know, when she was young, she worked at McDonald's. And she greeted every person with that 1,000-watt smile and said, "How can I help you?" Now she's at the pinnacle of power and she's still asking, "How can I help you?" I'll be so happy when she actually enters the White House as president, because she will break my record as the president who spent the most time at McDonald's. Now, but we got an election to win. And remember, we've got a guy that's pretty good at what he does. Donald Trump has been a paragon of consistency. He's still dividing, he's still blaming, he's still belittling other people. He creates chaos and then he sort of curates it as if it were precious art. Let me say, not a single day goes by, even though I've been gone for well over 23 years from the White House, not a day goes by that I don't thank the Lord for the chance I had to serve and what it meant. And one of the reasons, thank you. Wait. One of the reasons I love the job so much is that in the toughest times, even on the darkest days, if you tried hard enough, there was always something good you could do for somebody else. Now, some days that's not easy to do. You've got to deal with all these emergencies, or there's something going on here, there, or yonder. But Kamala Harris is the only candidate in this race who has the vision, the experience, the temperament, the will, and yes, the sheer joy to get something done. I mean, look, what does her opponent do with his voice? He mostly talks about himself, right? So the next time you hear him, don't count the lies. Count the eyes. Count the eyes. His vendettas, his vengeance, his complaints, his conspiracies. He's like one of those tenors opening up before he walks out on stage, like I did, trying to get his lungs open by singing me, 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 me. When Kamala Harris is president, every day will begin with you, 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 you. So, we got to ask ourselves the questions if we're going to hire a president. Do you want to build a strong economy from the bottom up and the middle out? Or do you want to spend the next 4 years talking about crowd size? You're going to have a hard time believing this, but so help me, I triple checked it. Since the end of the Cold War in 1989, America has created about 51 million new jobs. I swear I checked this 3 times. Even I couldn't believe it. What's the score? Democrats 50, Republicans 1. I'm glad that we've got a championship winning coach on our team. But even the most limited of us in what we know about Finland and a $2,000 a year out-of-pocket limit, and are trying to cover more drugs by bargaining for prices. We need more financing for small businesses. We need still to strengthen our alliances. I almost croaked in the first debate of this election season when President Trump said nobody respected America anymore like they did when he was president. Wait. And with a straight face. Look, you got to give him, he's a good actor. With a straight face, he cited as evidence of the respect that existed for us when he was there, the presidents of North Korea and Russia. I'd rather have the people who respect us now. And one of the things is when you send a signal to the other countries, you want them to know whether they agree with you or not, at least that you're on the level. Here's where you are and what you believe. What are they supposed to make to these endless tributes to the late, great Hannibal Lecter? I mean, President Obama once gave me the great honor of saying I was the explainer-in-chief. Folks, I thought about it, and I don't know what to say. Like Hakeem Jeffries, I too want an America that's more joyful, more inclusive, more future-focused. Just think what a burden it's been on us to get up day after day after day after day, buried in meaningless hot rhetoric, when there's so many opportunities out there, so many problems that need to be solved. I want that. And that's the America Kamala Harris will lead. And she's already made her first presidential decision, and she knocked it out of the park when she asked nominate Tim Walz to be the nominee for vice president. As they used to say when I was a young man growing up in Arkansas, you do not have to be all broke out with brilliance. You just look at Tim Walz, listen to him, follow his record as a teacher, as a coach in the National Guard, as a congressman, where he was the only Democrat, save one, elected in that district in more than 100 years. And he stayed a long time. And then he became a great governor. And by all accounts, he was a crack shot who had the courage among his rural constituents to say, we do not need these assault weapons available to people who can kill our kids in school. So, armed with her first decision, Kamala Harris confronts an interesting dilemma. We're going to walk out of here feeling pretty good, I think. We've got energy, we are happy, we feel like a load's off our shoulders. And we know we're just being asked to fight the same fight that the forces of progress have had to fight for 250 years. In the face of stiff and often violent opposition, we have to find a way to go forward together, where we the people make our union more perfect. So that's a good thing. How could we possibly lose? Kamala Harris has fought for kids their whole life that were left out and left behind. She's taken on gangs trafficking across the border. She's fought to protect the rights of homeowners. She's been our leader in the fight for reproductive freedoms, and we know a majority of the American people are with us on that. And she's gained an invaluable amount of experience as vice president, advancing our values and interests around the world. She's already said she's going to work really hard to make sure that no American working full-time lives in poverty or has to worry about their children living in poverty. He says that we got to make home ownership an achievable dream for everyone, not just a privilege. She said that and this meant a lot to me, that she would protect everybody's right to vote, whether or not they voted for her. They were citizens and they deserve the right to vote. The other day, her opponent implied that as his people voted one more time, they'd be able to rig it from now on and they wouldn't have to vote again. You think they're kidding, but I know a lot of these folks, and most of them are really good people, but some of them think that they are bound to dominate America politically, economically, and socially, and they have to use politics to do it, and they should rig the system. I don't believe that. And so here's what I want to tell you. We've seen more than one election slip away from us when we thought it couldn't happen, when people got distracted by phony issues or overconfident. This is a brutal, tough business. I want you to be happy. One of the reasons that President-to-be Harris is doing so well is that we're all so happy. But you should never underestimate your adversary. And these people are really good at distracting us, at triggering doubt, at triggering buyer's remorse. As the Obama said so eloquently last night, they are human, you know. They're bound to make a mistake now and then. We got to be tough. And so, as somebody who spends a lot of time in small towns and rural areas in New York and Arkansas and other places, I urge you to talk to all your neighbors. I urge you to meet people where they are. I urge you not to demean them, but not to pretend you don't disagree with them if you do. Treat them with respect, just the way you'd like them to treat you. Ask for their help and then follow our leader, Kamala, and ask them, how can I help you? We Democrats right now have a lot of hay in the barn. We've got massive achievements, massive advancements.
All right, we're back. We tried to hang in there, but we couldn't. I'm Michael Moynihan. Welcome back to the Free Press Live in Chicago at the convention, along with Batya Ungar-Sargon, my co-host and the opinion editor at Newsweek. Batya, I think I had a little bit of excitement for Bill Clinton, but I didn't remember how bad he was as a speaker. It's actually true in the sense that if you try to look back and like, what is a memorable Bill Clinton speech, I remember certain things. I remember Fleetwood Mac playing and then getting up on stage in 1992, but not so great as a speaker, I think, historically. But good Lord, he looked old.
Yeah, it's amazing. He's only a year older than Trump, but I mean, this speech is we've cut away from it because we got too bored.
Yes, we were too bored. I don't know. There was nothing happening. I literally don't know. I'm looking over, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, at my friend and actually my co-host on another job that I have, the Fifth Column. Camille Foster is with us, and Gabe Fleischer. Your Substack. First of all, you're like 16 years old, right?
22.
You've been doing this since you were like 12.
Something like that.
The name of the Substack?
Wake Up to Politics.
Wake Up to Politics. All right. Did you wake up during that interview? During that speech? It was absolutely horrible.
I think, if there's one thing Bill Clinton and Democratic conventions known for, he's the talker. I mean, his 88 speech, he was famously like, the first cheers of the speech were in closing.
Yeah.
So that's definitely, there's some history of that.
But the thing is interesting because the New York Times reported today that he scrapped the first speech and then went back and he was reading off paper here and not the teleprompter. And that's what he came up with, which was a bit of a rambling mess. Camille Foster, did you pay attention to that?
I think it might have been a little more compelling had he actually, not been 100 years old tonight.
Yeah.
But all
younger than Joe Biden and Donald Trump.
Yeah, but all in all, I mean, it's one of those things where I have to wonder, like, this is a political convention. The speeches are only going to be so rousing. Every one of them can't be a hit. And there have to be these moments where you bring in the old guard and give them an opportunity to weigh in on things.
But let me say this, and I'm going to throw this to you, Batya, because Camille says it's a convention. It can only be so rousing. When you come as a journalist, by the way, you always have to tell your editor nothing really happens at a convention. They're vibes pieces. But last night, Barack Obama reminded us that he is very good at this.
Quite good.
Did you not get that feeling?
Well, okay, but before we move on to Obama, because I want to discuss that, in depth with our guests, I wanted to ask you guys something about this question of like, who was included and who was excluded. So including Bill Clinton, who, by the way, on CNN the other day, I think it was 2 days ago, S.E. Cupp, one of their commentators, said, why is he here with his history of women? Aren't we turning a page? Blah, blah, blah. So he was included, and yet Mayor Eric Adams of New York, extremely popular mayor, was excluded because he criticized the Biden administration's handling of immigration. And the head of the Teamsters Union, my personal hero, Sean O'Brien, was excluded. The head of the Teamsters, 1.3 million Teamsters, half of whom are Democrats, he was excluded. He was ghosted by the campaign because he had the audacity of speaking at the RNC where he lectured Republicans about workers' rights. So my question to you guys is, what do you make of these inclusions and exclusions, and how does that reflect on the kind of party that you think the Democratic Party is trying to portray itself as?
And also remember that Sean O'Brien is a Shonda to the Irish people, and regardless of what you said, he's a disaster.
You are a Shonda.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
He is a hero.
Get out of here. Tommy Pinko Sim.
I guess what I would say, I think it's true. I think Bill Clinton, clearly not quite the messenger he once was. I do think, though, the inclusion is less about what he's saying, it's the symbolism. They've had, I guess, except for Jimmy Carter, every living former Democratic president. Jimmy Carter's grandson also spoke, and JFK's grandson. You know, it's really setting up the contrast of they have kind of the whole party's past, passing the baton, passing the torch over to Kamala Harris, contrasted, of course, with the Republican convention, where you did not find George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, any of their kind of elder statesmen in their party. So I think that's really what the inclusion of Clinton's about. I do think there's fair questions to be raised about his history with women, and I think there's some Democrats certainly that kind of scratch their heads at why he's included, considering some of the party's messaging on that. But I think that's really what him being there allows you to say, is like this whole party is kind of united, rallied behind Kamala Harris, whereas the Republican Party, you know, a lot of his critics within the party and a lot of the kind of people who were led the tickets in the past, nowhere to be seen in Milwaukee.
And that's a matter of self-exclusion. I mean, you could hope that W would show up. He wouldn't come. Most of those people who are recognizable, very prominent conservatives, wouldn't have been there if he had wanted them there.
I'm
not sure they wouldn't have come. So to the extent they were excluded, they kind of cut themselves out of the party. Fully unified, and quite frankly, that has been the greatest success of this convention for Democrats. At the moment, they do look considerably unified. And I'm curious, is AOC the only squad member who has spoken at the DNC?
The only one who's spoken, like Ilhan Omar, Cory Bush, they've all been shown on camp.
I think
like
Jamal Bowman was in the park across the street, but I can't be sure about that. All right, do we want to, speaking of elder statesmen of the party,
yeah, we have a few.
Should we check out? Should we check out Nancy Pelosi?
Oh, here we go.
She's
Nancy Pelosi's up. Let's
and somebody who is up there in age and quite coherent. Apparently, Bill Clinton just wandered off stage and she wandered on. But we're happy to have her. We're happy to have her. So let's watch a bit of her. We're not watching a bit of her, but that's all right. We can talk about her while we're waiting to watch a bit of her. Nancy Pelosi, but Batya said this to me before we started, that, you know, people who are, we're talking about Obama and, you know, just the Democratic, you know, has-beens in some way, and the bench and the, you know, people that have been around for a long time. And as Batya said, she is quite good. You see her on TV. I mean, how old is she?
I'm not sure, 81?
81, something like that, right? And she does it. She's. I mean, again, none of this is about substance.
Right.
This is just about style, and she's.
No, but I mean, it's like she just shanked a president and oversaw a coup with the help of Obama.
She's a big coup. She loves the coup.
It's definitely a coup. Absolutely coup. Are you guys coup skeptics? What are you?
Coup is not the word I would use.
I wouldn't use coup.
Batya, I have to interrupt.
Voluntary withdrawal.
I have to interrupt you. Because the coup-monger is on stage, 84-year-old coup-monger, according to somebody who just popped up there on the screen and said 84 years old. Let's go watch a little bit of her.
So brazenly assaulted the bedrock of our democracy, so lethally embraced political violence, so willfully betrayed his oath of office. Let us not forget who assaulted democracy on January 6th. He did. But let us not forget who saved democracy that day. We did. And thank God we had a Democratic House of Representatives then. We returned to the Capitol that very same night. We insisted on certifying the election results on the floors of the House and the Senate. And we demonstrated to America and to the world that American democracy prevailed. The parable of January 6th reminds us that our democracy is only as strong as the courage and commitment of those entrusted with its care. And we must choose leaders who believe in free and fair elections, who respect the peaceful transfer of power. The choice couldn't be clearer. Those leaders are Vice President Harris and Governor Walz. When the sun rose on January 7th, as our national anthem declares, we gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Now, in this election, we are called upon to do the same, to stand together, to reject autocracy, to choose democracy, and we will do so by electing a Democratic House with Hakeem Jeffries as Speaker of the House, electing a Democratic Senate, electing Tim Walz as Vice President of the United States, and electing Kamala Harris as the President of the United States. Onward to victory.
Rather anticlimactic, yeah. I just said she was a great speaker. I think she is good when interviewed on cable news. I don't know who wrote that. Again, a couple of very good days. And I want to talk about that briefly. Just as a general impressions, we haven't gone over that. I mean, what have been your general impressions watching this stuff? And have you been in the hall?
Yeah, I've been in the hall both nights.
So what's the kind of vibe like there? What did it feel like to you?
I would say the vibe is highly energized. I mean, I've been in the hall both nights. I've been talking to Democratic delegates, members of Congress, governors, whoever I can find around the United Center, and they are all highly energized. And then you ask them all, what do you think this convention would be like if it had been Joe Biden?
Exactly, yeah.
Very different. I talked to Dean Phillips yesterday, one of the earliest Biden critics. He said he thinks the mood would have been funereal. Was the word he used. And instead, they have what everyone is describing to me as just a flip of a switch. Yeah. And suddenly they are all energized and excited. I mean, that is a very energized group.
All right, but so speaking of Dean Phillips, right, he tried to enter the primary. Yeah. He entered the primary. He did not get very far because the DNC was pretty clear about not having it open.
Go ahead.
This is a question. Is he not upset, resentful? Is he not in the coup team that this was stolen from him more than anybody else?
Again, I mean, coup definitely not the language I would use, but I asked him about that. Well, I asked him not if he was angry more, did he feel vindicated? I mean, he was the first, for months there were polls showing 80% of Democrats didn't want Biden to run again, and there was basically one member of Congress, and it was him. He said that he doesn't need vindication, doesn't want any glory. He said, perhaps slightly self-aggrandizing, that he feels he's happy if he was just the Paul Revere to Biden's George Washington. Yeah, that's what he's
been using that line. We had him on the live stream from the RNC, and he wanted
to be the messenger. Yeah. He feels like he just wanted the party to have their best chance to win, and he feels they did that.
I've pointed this out a number of times before. Everybody thinks that this is a new phenomenon. If you look back in 2022, I think it was June or July 2022, you see polls that have a majority of Democrats saying that Joe Biden shouldn't run. Yeah. 2 years later, the coup happens. The thing happens. Let's call it the thing. And everyone says, God, that was a lightning speed.
Yeah.
The American people, despite Operation Bubble Wrap, have been kind of pointing this out to themselves for a long time.
For a very long time. And unfortunately for Dean Phillips, I don't think he's going to get any like garlands. No one is going to say, gosh, you were right about this. He blew himself up and there is no political benefit to it. He was out of step with the party. But you talk about the energy at this particular DNC, the enthusiasm and excitement. Just think about where we were only a couple of weeks ago. Everyone expected the DNC to be a total calamity, whether it was Joe Biden who showed up or a brokered convention. What no one expected is
or 1968 all over.
Sure, and what no one expected is what's happening now. Yeah. Everyone rallying behind Kamala, the party completely unified, and everyone selling her as the second coming. Yeah. It'll be very interesting to see if she can live up to the billing on the night that she has to give her speech. I expect Walz will do pretty good because he's been fairly good so far.
Yeah, he's been pretty good. I mean, what do you make of Walz behind the lectern? I mean, he's kind of your cup of tea, right? Being that you're well, yeah, you're a filthy red.
The thing about Tim Walz is he is right out of central casting. Like, he is an actor pretending to be a folksy normie when actually his politics are pretty far out of the mainstream for sort of the kind of people he dresses like, right? Dresses well like, right? That's my impression. What do you guys think of him?
I mean, I think this is what I'll say, talking to the Democrats who I've talked to around, I do think convention, I think, as we brought up, there's it's a lot of speechifying. It's a lot of politicians giving kind of stale talking points. To me, the moments that stick out of the conventions are the more kind of human, authentic moments. I think Jasmine Crockett had one of those the other night. I think the parents of the hostage who spoke had one of those tonight. I do think for a lot of Democrats, I think obviously not everyone views him that way. To Democrats, they view him as not a politician, as an authentic. He talks like a coach. He talks like someone they know in their towns. I think that's a fair point to make. His policies have clearly evolved throughout his career as he went from kind of a rural congressional district to the whole state of Minnesota, which is obviously trending blue. But he still, I do think, has retained that persona, and I think it is quite effective on stage. He does not come across like most kind of buttoned-up Democratic politicians. He comes across much more kind of like a folksy dad, and I think that is a persona that it worked for Joe Biden for a long time. That's a time-tested method for a lot of Democratic politicians.
There is something that offends me as the son of a union worker, and it is the fake folksiness. It is the fact that people are now calling him coach. Not assistant coach, by the way, not defensive coordinator. Doesn't ring, right? He's coach. And his wife today, I don't know if you saw this, his wife today tweeted a picture of Tim Walz sewing his own flannel shirt. I mean, like, buy a fucking new one, buddy. Like, come on. Come on. This is the fake folksiness. And we saw that with Republicans in the past. And the great example of that was Lamar Alexander, who in '96 he had the flannel as his logo. That was his thing. It said Lamar with an exclamation point. I always do that with the flannel because he drove a truck. But then he started talking and everyone's like, this guy's a total phony.
Okay, so here's my question. Like, it seems like the Democrats have read the room. They've understand that the kind of coastal elitism is alienating a lot of the people they need to win. My question is isn't Tim Walz just the identity politics version of like white suburbia rather than an actual deep look at how their policies have hurt the working class and benefited the college educated community?
I certainly don't think that's how Democrats are thinking about the thing. And look, I think it's fair to criticize Walz's politics. I think it's fair to talk about how far he is from many Americans with respect to social policy, but he's the vice presidential pick. And so far as he has particular political positions, people are paying more attention to the party, well, not the party, but this particular campaign and really the top of the ticket. And at the moment, they're able to project all manner of things on Kamala and even more so with Walz. So in that respect, to the extent he can pull off his act, as they all are doing some sort of act, and Kamala can keep it together at the top of the ticket, then this will probably be a pick that doesn't hurt her. He seems to be pretty good with respect to the rollout, certainly not having the kind of disastrous start that J.D. Vance has been having. And just kind of calling balls and strikes. He looks like a decent candidate when he's out there on the stump. Is there a possibility that some of these other issues will become germane in the campaign? Perhaps. It's certainly the case that there are plenty of military people who won't vote for the guy.
Not a big issues campaign, Camille.
We just haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah. So Gabe, you said, you look for the human stories, there's a lot of speechifying. I always think of conventions as we're going to set the vibe of the party, the agenda of the party. And you see a real reset here, right? They're going to go with progressive things that are popular with Americans, like abortion issues. But the reset here is very, very different when you're outside the hall. Much smaller protests than we expected. But you go inside and people are handing you USA signs.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty interesting thing. Cutaways to people in red, white, and blue.
Yes.
Very, very patriotic language on stage. A lot of uses of the word freedom.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying that you have to
Freedom,
believe it.
yes. Patriot. I'm just saying that doesn't. I don't remember because I've been paying attention. Because obviously the RNC was heavy
Not
on love of country,
enough.
love of God. But here, there's been very little about America or like.
I don't mean that in a Lee Greenwood kind of way. The Republicans don't do it that way. Democrats don't do it that way. But there has been an emphasis on America's a great country, as opposed to Kamala Harris in 2020, right? That Kamala Harris is talking about America's sordid past.
Yes.
This is talking about the positivity towards America's future. Is there any policy positions in that? No. Is there a vibe shift? I think so. But Gabe, I want to ask you something. I mean, let's take something like abortion. I mean, they're hammering this one hard because when you look at those poll numbers, that plays well for them, right?
Yeah, I mean that is one of their most potent political attacks against Donald Trump. There's no doubt. I think to your point, when you look at the polls, most Americans, more and more Americans describe themselves as pro-choice since Dobbs. That is clearly where the trends are going. And, even Trump himself, you see him kind of trying to dance around the map. He's never really given a clear position on abortion throughout this campaign.
Yeah.
There's an abortion referendum in Florida in November. He's a Florida voter, has not said how he'll vote on it. And there's a reason for that. And you see him trying to kind of bring the party somewhat more to the center on the issue, but that's difficult because obviously where the party is historically, I think, whether it's not a very issue-oriented campaign, I think it's true that they've yet to really roll out most of their policy positions. Then again, she's the vice president of the United States. So you look at the administration she's the vice president to, that gives you a rough idea of where most of their positions are. But I think, this is clearly one where a lot of Biden's policies are clearly unpopular, and this is just a clear issue you can use to kind of hammer them.
Let me ask a specific question about Kamala because I've been feeling myself sort of drawn in both directions on her. Like on the one hand, they'll play these very moving clips of like Shirley Chisholm, right? The first Black woman to run for president. And then they sort of try to shoehorn Kamala into this like civil rights struggle. And they use the music and I find myself getting emotional. And then I'm like, wait a minute, it's Kamala Harris.
Yes.
That struggle is over. It was won. And she did not come from that tradition. She is not from that background. And then I get very sort of outraged at being asked to see her in that context, almost like it's a degradation of that history, but also I feel like gaslit while also falling for it.
What do you mean by she's not from that? I mean, you sound to me like you're skating awfully close to what Donald Trump has said, saying that she's not
an African,
half black and half Indian, which she is factually.
An African American. She's not ADOS, right? She's not an American descendant of slaves.
She's
like that's
black. She's half black.
I'm not talking about her race. I'm talking about her genealogy. I'm talking
Camille,
about.
you want to jump in here as the son of Jamaicans?
Not really. It always seems to me that most of the debate about kind of Kamala and her background is like somewhat silly. Is she black? Is she whatever? It's all kind of ridiculous and idiotic. To the extent we're talking about her as black, it's because we're applying some sort of one drop rule, and it's all stupid. So I could set all of that aside and just address this question of the civil rights movement and whether or not she was actually a part of the struggle, et cetera. I can remember a moment in the debate where she insisted that busing had some major impact on her personal. She was that little girl, so to speak.
Yes,
So at least
that little
for a
girl was
while,
me.
this has been kind of part of the mythology surrounding Kamala. But no, I think it's pretty difficult to actually make the case that this ought to feel profoundly historical, apart from the fact that there's going to be someone of a different gender sitting in that seat. But she was the vice president. She has been a senator. She's been the district attorney of a major American city. This is kind of just one more thing that she would have done. Would it be profoundly important to her personally? Sure. Does it mean the country has reached some new plateau? I don't really think so. At the end of the day, what ought to matter is substance on policy. We don't really know where she stands. For all of the talk about abortion, I have absolutely no idea what Kamala proposes to do about it as president of the United States. How do the two actually work together? The two things that she mentions all the time: abortion and January 6th. January 6th, I understand we're upset about that. And in general, many people, including myself, think it's probably disqualifying with respect to Trump. Now, making the case for Kamala, I'm not sure how that actually factors in, except I'm not him. And for a lot of Americans, that won't be enough. That may not motivate them to vote for her, even if it doesn't nominate them.
It's something. It is not enough. Camille and Gabe, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And apparently, this is a video. I don't know what this is. Apparently, I was at a protest, a pro-Palestinian protest. And
as you do.
I filmed something, and I haven't seen this. I don't know what it is.
Let's watch it.
Yeah, we're going to watch it. It's going to be the first time. This is like those old world premiere videos on MTV. This is showing my age. This is me at a protest yesterday or 2 days ago. In front of the United Center, which is where the DNC just kicked off today, but the anti-Israel, pro-Palestine protest got to the outside here, to the cordons, and they got through one layer of it saying, this is how the Gazans got through, referencing October 7th. And they didn't last very long. They got through for maybe a few minutes. The police came, ejected them, and it was a lot of 1968 Democratic Convention cosplay. Well, what I would say is there are not a lot of people here. They're making a lot of noise, but not a lot of people. And I would say the ratio of media to protesters is probably 2 protesters for every 1 member of the media, including myself. We're also guilty. We are back. We've come back from that amazing, scintillating video in which I point out one very important thing about the protests is that when anything bad happens at these protests, there are 700 media cameras and 7 protesters. And it reminded me, and I said this to my producer, it reminded me of the photo from the 2016 election where they were waiting for something, 2016 inauguration. They were waiting so desperately for something to happen that someone kicked over a garbage can, set it on fire, and there's a photo of about 15, 20 photojournalists around taking a picture of it. But that's neither here nor there, because we are back with someone who joined us from the RNC, a former Democratic candidate for president, and as I said during that stream, author of 450,000 books. Marianne Williamson, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. But did you just say I was joining you from the RNC?
No, you did join us from the RNC. Do you remember?
Oh,
yes, it was you. Yes, it was from home. It was a Zoom.
I was trying to figure out what are you talking about.
Yeah,
no, right. Then we did. I
yes,
do remember.
We did. We did.
Yeah, fun.
Tell me what you have made of the speeches of the convention so far. What's your general takeaway from it?
I thought the talk tonight from the parents of the hostage, Hirsch, was very moving. You know, because I've run, because I feel that I'm speaking from sort of the inside the belly of the beast.
Yeah.
I see 2 separate universes.
Yeah.
One universe is that which is for me, it's for many people, a conviction that Donald Trump should not be president again. And therefore, a decision that I will vote for. Appears to be Kamala Harris, seems to be the only. But the hoopla of the machinery, the performative drama, I see as a product of a system that is very problematic. And even though we have an immediate issue here, which is to make sure in this case that Kamala wins, on the other side of this, I feel that there's a deep-seated corruption within the political system, that none of this hoopla, it's like whipped cream on top of some very, really corrupt and poisonous stuff. The political system in itself that I see as a reflection of some of the worst aspects of our modern culture.
Can you unpack that a little bit? Tell us about the poison, where exactly it is, how we could fight it.
Well, I used to feel that too often these political parties were representing the interests of huge corporate entities. Now I realize they are huge corporate entities. They're not just representing the interests of huge corporate entities, and they behave at times with the ruthlessness and the soullessness that we associate with too much of modern capitalism. I think there's such an ethical breakdown in our society. I think that in anything, the process by which you achieve a goal is as important as the goal, and ultimately determines, Gandhi said the end is inherent in the means. Modern politics has this ruthlessness, the end justifies the means. Doesn't matter who we mess with. But as Gandhi said, the end is inherent in the means. And there's this ethical carelessness, recklessness. And we talk about how, and I think this gets into much of what I've heard you talk about, we talk about how it's the dominance of money. It's more than that. It's the ethical breakdown in American society today. The things that are considered okay to do, and especially in politics. And and yet, for me, part of the ethical issue is that not time to talk about too much of that right now, however, because the biggest job is to make sure that Donald Trump is not president again. So there are many, it's like a circus with many rings for someone like myself.
For people who generally agree with that analysis of American politics, I mean, you can't help but feel despair in some way that, you are not somebody who's destitute. You have a name. People know who you are. You have money. You can raise money, and you just run into a wall. There's no way to get through it. So those of us who say,
just add to the list of reasons that is shameful is you had a platform that represents where the actual base of your party is at.
That's right.
And you brought love and spirituality, which we are all very much lacking to the process. So I just wanted to add to this.
I'm lacking too. I have no spiritual. I'm just
to the outrage of how you were stonewalled. So we have finished.
But it's the boring but necessary question: is that how do you fix this? Because you've tried, in the sense that you're running for the presidency of the United States of America, and as you say, that the Democratic Party, much like the Republican Party, are themselves corporations, right?
There's so much with what you said and with what you said. First of all, the kind of money that I have and that I am able to raise is so minuscule compared to the amounts of money that these machines are operating with. That's number one. Number two, I think it's really interesting something you said, because I agree with what you said. What someone like myself is talking about is where people are. And when you said people despair, I would despair were it not for the fact that I get that the people are not the problem. Yeah. I traveled all over this country for the last year and a half. And remember, I did this before. The American people are ready for deep, true, real, noble. We're hardwired to do great things in this country. I mean, we're a country that elected Abraham Lincoln. So I don't get that the American people aren't ready for depth. I mean, I've known this in my career for a long time. People hear you at the level you speak to them from. You have a real conversation about the Declaration of Independence. I don't care if it's Democrats or Republicans, they lean in. Let's talk about what happened in 1776. Let's talk about what happened with women's suffrages and abolition and the founding of the labor movement and segregation and civil rights movement. The people are ready to get real, but there is institutional resistance to the kind of depth that I think is the conversation we need to be having, because nothing else is deep enough to sustain us. I'll give you an example. You're talking about all the rah-rah, happiness, joy. And we need to be facing what a sobering moment this is. People are dying because we're not getting it right. I'm not even saying who's not getting it right. That's not even the question, but that we're not getting it right. The people who are dying in Gaza and Israel, the people who are dying in Ukraine, the people who are dying deaths of despair, the opioid crisis, children afraid of guns. We're not, and I have a career that's been with people who, the joke about me has been, nobody calls Marianne when things are going well. It's when, that's just how my career developed because of my work with AIDS. Somebody just got the news, the test results came back, it's cancer. your child is addicted to meth, somebody died. And I've seen over and over again what happens when people get the worst news. Within 5 minutes, layers of meaningless, ultimately meaningless preoccupation just drop away. And people get really adult really fast and really mature really fast. And that's where this country is ready to be. But we have to get there. And I think the people are ready to get there. People know this isn't it. And so, once again, when this is over, no matter what happens, no matter who wins, I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on, if you think that if your guy wins or your girl wins, no matter who it is, then everything's going to be great. Something needs to, I read about the idea that these are chaotic times, that there's chaos out of which will come a new order. But I think we have to be in a very wise and sober and serious and grown up. It's so immature. I think our main political conversation is not worthy of us, not deep enough.
Can I ask you about Trump specifically? Because, he came to a party, one of these corporate machines, the RNC, at a time when the party was, neocon, pro-war, free trade, free market oriented, anti-abortion, anti-gay, and anti-union. And he has sort of reshaped the party. It's now anti-trade, anti-war, abortion, states' rights, 15 weeks. It's pro-gay. He took the anti-abortion and anti-gay marriage language out of the RNC's platform for the first time in 40 years. He really took a wrecking ball to that corporate entity. Do you not find anything in that to admire, if not in terms of content, at least in terms of strategy? Oh, and the pro-union thing, having, Sean O'Brien speak at the RNC. Is there nothing there that sort of boost your spirits about the possibility of such creative chaos and destruction towards more of a people-oriented platform?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's a more people-oriented platform. But the first things that you were saying are the product of a powerful leader. But there are powerful leaders who represent great moral advancement, and there are powerful leaders that represent regression, and history is filled with both. So the fact that he was able to take an institution and reshape it, I will give you that. The idea that he's weak and ineffective is absurd. I'll give you that. From my perspective, when I think of the traditions, Eisenhower said that the American mind at its best is both liberal and conservative. I do get that there are high-minded conservative principles and high-minded liberal principles. I think he's run roughshod over high-minded conservative principle. So the fact that he's smashed the machine, which is, I do think, why so many people supported him to begin with, he smashed the machine. He had the power personality to do that. So did some of the worst people in history. So do I see any good in some of what he's done? Yeah, there are some places where I can say, he's got a point. That's not to be discounted. But in terms of his overall effect, first of all, his pathological lying, his character, his lack of any sense of serious, even understanding, much less respect for the traditions of American democracy. So those things override for me facts that every once in a while I'll give it to you. I'll say, that's interesting that he said that, and I won't make fun of him for those things the way some of people on the left will do, including some things he said recently.
Marianne, you obviously think the greatest danger to America right now is another Trump presidency. You also have a very dim view of the Democratic Party. If Kamala Harris is the only kind of bulwark against another Trump administration, would you go out and campaign for her?
Yes, and also you just said I have a dim view of the Democratic Party. Yeah. I would actually...
The machine, I should say that, right?
Yeah, yes, and I think that there's a misunderstanding on the part of the party. I grew up in a home where no matter what year it was, if there was an election and you asked my father, who'd you vote for, Daddy? He said Roosevelt. I mean, I grew up in a home that was so Democratic and had been a Democrat all my life. I ran as a Democrat because I believe in the traditional pillars of the Democratic Party, which is namely that the powers of government can be used to help people. I'm in that sense, a Democratic traditionalist. So whereas some people within the Democratic Party today look at someone like myself, like she's trying to hijack the party. No, they hijack the party. I represent the voices of Franklin and Eleanor, and to me, they represent the DuPonts and the Whitneys and the Morgans.
People that say you're trying to hijack the party.
Nobody thinks I'm that powerful.
No, I know. But you said
you know, the ideas.
Yeah.
It's people like
I was going to say, who are these insane people?
No,
if you go into the convention hall, are you treated in a particular way? Do they say, "Oh my God, this is Marianne"?
No, it's bigger than that.
Like you.
They wouldn't give me a ticket.
Oh my God.
Really?
They wouldn't give me a ticket. Now listen to this.
Oh my
I did
God.
get, despite, I know. I'm laughing. It's so absurd. So let's like think about this. So the way what we have is a political media industrial complex. So from the first day I announced this time, first of all, let's go back 4 years. I was given, I think for a minor candidate, I think last time I was given, I mean, they make fun of me. They're going to make fun. I mean, you know, they're going to make, but in general, I was on CNN a fair amount, given that I was a minor candidate. Same with MSNBC. I got a CNN town hall. This time, get rid of it. There will be no opposition to Joe Biden. I was blacklisted on CNN. I was blacklisted on MSNBC, and that's, you know, Tulsi Gabbard talks about that. It's a playbook. There was a decision it would be Joe, and it was said that there was no other credible candidate. In their mind, you know, we're not. To me, the qualification should be the qualifications as articulated in the Constitution of the United States. I fit. Yeah. Also, this idea that we don't primary an incumbent. Well, I'm old enough to remember when Gene McCarthy primaried Lyndon Johnson. Nobody thought it was weird. We thought it was democracy. People primary incumbent senators and congresspeople and mayors. I mean, that's what you do in a democracy. But so, yeah. And then, despite all that, we got 500,000 votes. So how much more could I be in the process as a Democrat? And yeah, they wouldn't even give me a ticket. I couldn't even get in. I can't. I've been here in Chicago. I can't get in.
But you still came.
I came to Chicago. Well, came to Chicago because I thought a lot of stuff was happening like this around it. I wanted to be in. But then friends have said to me, well, we can't, like one woman who's working, she said, oh, I'm here and I'm doing stuff and I can get you in. And then two people, including a former head of the DNC, that I'll get you a ticket, both said to me, well, we need to know first that you're giving a full-throated endorsement of Kamala.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Thank you, Batya. Thank you.
This is horrifying. This is
thank you.
But
thank
I'm
you.
thinking about
Thank
this,
you.
and like,
Thank you.
and they call the other side dictators. Like,
Thank you,
this is a
Batya.
dictatorship of like. They're so terrified of her weakness, they will not let you in the building.
No, it's so absurd.
Oh my God.
And yes, I am voting for Kamala.
Well, that's what makes this even more
I don't
upsetting.
owe it to you to what?
Because compare you to RFK Jr. and how he has behaved throughout this entire process.
But I don't like what they're doing to him either.
But the lack of grace and the this is so unacceptable. I mean, I cannot believe this. I mean, shock. Have you ever heard of anything like this?
Yes.
And by the way,
For hundreds of years, I've heard of it. Yeah.
But I want to say something else here. If 500,000 people voted for me in a close election,
Don't you want those voters?
No.
yeah. I mean, when I got out of the election last time, when I got out of the race, Bernie Sanders called me. Elizabeth Warren called me 3 times to ask if I would endorse. Last time was very different.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so upside down. It's supposed to, what I have to prove to you, I think it's supposed to be the other way, you know?
Yeah.
And like I said, they're different rings and we can't have Donald Trump. So.
Well, Marianne Williamson, you've come to Chicago. We hope that we see you breach the gates to get inside the United Center.
I hope so.
I mean, let's see what we can do. Let's get
Um,
some tickets for you.
I said, that's
You and
okay.
Matt.
I'll go do the free press.
Yes, that exactly
I'll go
right.
do the free press.
You're always welcome.
Yeah,
there.
thank you.
Losing-
Thank you. And I'd love to talk about some other things. And let's talk about Israel sometime. I'd love to
Yes.
do that with you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Marianne Williamson, thank you very much for
Thank
being
you.
here. And we talked at the top of this hour, wherever the hell we are, with this very bizarre convention and the bizarre timing of it, which they only tell you by the day of.
I
You have
know.
no idea what's happening.
RNC, by the way, they would tell you at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
Literally, it was like, this
the
one's
minute.
speaking
Yeah.
at 10:04,
Yeah.
and this one's speaking at. It was very organized.
But we talked at the top about the kind of the patriotic vibe, the kind of trying to be a little more bipartisan
Which I
and inclusive.
disputed.
Which you disputed.
Oh, wait, I have to
and
add one more
inclusive.
thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I have to have one more
Yeah.
thing, okay?
Yeah.
I was going to speak at a caucus today. It's called Progress Libs. I was not, because I was told, are you ready? Drum roll, drum roll,
Yeah.
drum
Oh
roll.
no.
I'm too old.
They told you that?
I know. We got to make sure everybody has a voice. POC, LGBTQ, trans,
Yeah.
Everybody's got to have a voice, which I agree. But meanwhile, half of America's seniors are living on less than $28,000 a year. It is absolutely a crisis in their lives when they don't have hearing aids, glasses, dental. But no, you can't speak. You're too old.
They didn't say that about Joe Biden
That
for a very long
wasn't the
time, by the
DNC,
way.
but it was someone in one of the issues around, and I
Oh
thought,
my God.
yeah, I can't even. I'm even kicked out of the ring around the thing. Yeah, no, thanks for having me on, guys.
Well, we had Marianne Williamson on, despite her age, because we don't discriminate like that. We love her. We love her 85,000 books that sell 80 million copies apiece. Check them out. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
joining
It's
us.
wonderful to meet you.
And let's throw to this clip here, because we were talking about this before, about that kind of attempt at inclusivity, and it, kind of making the left flank of the Democratic Party cringe a little bit. This is Barack Obama in a kind of coded way talking about, I don't know, what do we call it? Wokeism? Is that right? Is that what we call it?
That
It's
is
kind of
what
a
we
dumb
call it.
word, but let's take a look at Barack Obama.
Sense of mutual respect has to be part of our message. Our politics have become so polarized these days that all of us across the political spectrum seem so quick to assume the worst in others unless they agree with us on every single issue. We start thinking that the only way to win is to scold and shame and out-yell the other side. And after a while, regular folks just tune out, or they don't bother to vote. Approach may work for the politicians who just want attention and thrive on division, but it won't work for us.
And Barack Obama wowing the crowd, wowing the whole arena, which I wasn't there because we were preparing for this. I was outside the arena. But there were some people at the Free Press that were there, and maybe at protest too. Peter Savodnik, welcome, and Olivia Reingold, who decides to get very comfortable here. It's very unprofessional.
Shoes on.
Very unprofessional. These are not our couches. And you cannot put your shoes
I
on.
did think about it, but
It's
it's
comfortable.
just it's
They're
the
very
most-
comfortable.
I'm just comfortable
Hard
this
to
way.
do an interview in this, but Peter,
too comfortable.
were you inside during Obama's
yeah.
speech?
Yeah.
What I mean, we got a lot to talk about, but that just I was watching it on a stream,
Yeah.
which is not really getting the whole thing, but it was pretty well received.
So
I'd say
Peter
that,
actually
right?
wrote an amazing piece for the Free Press comparing President Obama's speech and Michelle Obama's speech. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your piece and your impressions?
So thank you. I think that Obama played the role of, party cheerleader. We have a steep climb ahead, and our job is to, mount, the hill, and we will take on the Republicans. We're going to win. And it was very much sort of about kind of go fight, win, and let's do it. And it was very inspiring, and it reminded you of the 2008 campaign. And it was very evocative and compelling.
And kind of centrist in parts too.
Oh God, yeah. I mean,
like about regulation. You say talking about
Right.
building regulations and and talking about kind of the wokeness thing of don't be mean to people who disagree with you?
Nor did he talk much at all about anything he did in office except for the Affordable Care Act. That was, I think, the only substantive, thing that he accomplished that he actually touched on. Everything else, the whole kind of 8 years was kind of glossed over. And I think it was really, he talked about Biden and he talked about Kamala and about sort of, the challenge ahead. And I think, he sounded anchored to the, sort of the reality of, doing battle with the Republicans, but it was very, kind of optimistic in tone and very Obama-ish.
Yeah.
Michelle Obama struck me as much more, I think, sort of attuned to the anxieties, the fears of a lot of people on the progressive left who I think genuinely fear what a second Trump administration would mean, who I think, can't sleep at night often because of that. And she talked about her feelings of mourning. She wove together her weaving of she wove together her mourning her mother's recent passing with this sort of feeling of mourning of the America that Barack Obama had helped kind of lead America toward, having been kind of abandoned or jettisoned somehow. And I think she did, sort of touch on or kind of in a way kind of address this kind of underlying, very, very kind of, I think, disconcerting question that I think Democrats frequently try to sidestep, which is, the election of Trump amounts to a refutation of the whole 8-year Obama tenure. And so I think, there's this sort of complicated, grappling with that she really got at last night, which I thought was fantastic.
But here's my thing, okay?
Yeah.
It was a refutation of Obama and Clinton. It was a refutation of their economic policies, which immiserated working class Americans. And yet, if you believe Michelle Obama, she wants you to think that if you have nostalgia for 2019 when you could afford groceries, that is like having nostalgia for the Jim Crow South, right? That has been the vibe here, is that Trumpism is not like the return of the repressed, of the working class in America who has been put down again and again and again by the very Democrats who used to represent them, right? But that it's the return of some sort of racism or sexism, and they use all of this language to sort of convey that, when the truth of the matter is that Trump is polling at 40% of Black men. Before Harris entered the race, he was getting the majority of Hispanic voters, right? He has put together a working class coalition that is multiracial and multi-ethnic, and that is the refutation of the later Obama years, no?
I think, to be fair to the Obamas, I don't think that Trump is simply a refutation of their economic policies. It's more yes, I think they're saying to that, but I think it's more that, look, the promise of Clinton and Obama was the forging of this kind of liberal populism, and in both cases that turned out to be something of a joke, right? So this was about sort of recentering, American politics around a kind of a workable middle where we embrace markets, but we also don't allow, anyone to be left behind, and we certainly don't allow for the sort of the demolition of Main Street and all that, and obviously Obama didn't deliver on that front. But then again, I don't know that he could have. We're talking about these huge tectonic forces that I think, if we're being honest, no president really has any power over these things. But the reality, the political reality, just didn't match the rhetoric and sort of the promise of hope and change. And so I think Trump was able to tap into the zeitgeist, the anger, the anxiety. I don't know that we can lay this on Obama's feet. Just I don't think that we can suggest that Trump somehow rectified all that Obama or any of his predecessors failed to accomplish. So I think I think it's a little more complicated, but I do agree that it does amount to a kind of a rejoinder to sort of the failure of Obama's liberal populism.
Olivia.
Yes.
You're a bit of a stunt journalist these days. You have to put a helmet on for the reporting that you do. Why,
Yeah.
Everywhere you go, I see a dispatch where there's a gang of people around you that look like they're about to beat you up.
I did tell my producer.
Is that happen again this time? Did you get?
I
You're
would
doing
say
protest stuff.
I would say I was harassed this week, probably once and a half, something like that.
You are very brave. You are very brave.
That is kind of you. These people, I don't know what they're capable of. Like, the most extreme thing about them so far seems to be their language. Which really the next step genuinely would just be like, I'm going to kill you, like rhetorically.
And to be clear,
right
these are
that.
the protesters.
These
right?
are,
The
I would feel
protesters.
anti-Israel.
Or were you like, these are jokers who all they have is their signs
I did. Okay, so I know there's been a lot of talk about the protests that happened outside the Israeli consulate yesterday, and everyone's like, there were just as many journalists as protesters. But it's like, okay, you should have seen these protesters because they did not mean well. So
was it a small group, or is that's a splinter faction of the, I don't know how many people, 1,000 people or whatever that were marching the other day?
Yeah. So how they actually advertised this rally was they said, if you thought Monday's march, which was the one that they were calling family friendly, was it was in comparison though. Yeah. But if you were satisfied, you thought that was a successful way to get to the Democrats, don't come to our rally. Like, if you thought that we need to go much further, come out tonight outside the Israeli consulate. And so about 200 people showed up, dozens of whom ended up arrested. And yeah, they really are the most extreme elements, not even of the party, because these people, I was kind of surprised to learn that maybe one man I spoke to out of the 2 or 3 dozen protesters I've spoken to since I've been here, consider themselves a Democrat. It's communist, socialist, Marxist, anarcho-capitalist, lots of variations.
There was a flag of the Hoshaist Stalinist faction. And if, dear viewers, if you don't know who Enver Hoxha is, that's going back a little bit. An Albanian Stalinist dictator that they have adopted.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow, obscure. Good
yes,
for them.
I saw the flag and I said, there's something off about
There's
that.
a scholar.
There's somebody who likes Enver Hoxha and Albanian Stalinism. But that kind of underscores something in a way. It's like, these are just jokers, right? I mean,
I don't know. It was really okay. So I think one way to think of, everyone focused about how many journalists were covering that rally, but honestly, the real content creators are the protesters themselves. It was like a TikTok content creation hub where they were like filming videos. They were like,
film your crimes,
pigs, imperialist pigs,
smart
basically
people.
with like ring lights.
Wow.
Enver Hoxha never had a ring light, by the way, for the record.
I don't know.
No, trust me on this one.
He
As a scholar of Albanian communism.
So anyway, I don't know what you were saying. Sorry.
No, I was saying, like, are they kind of jokers? And I'm wondering what everyone thinks about this in a way, because, like, you go back to all the comparisons to 68, right? And you read a book like Brian Burroughs' book, Days of Rage, which catalogs the hundreds of bombs that were going off in the early 1970s in New York from Puerto Rican terrorists, and like there were Croatian terrorists. It was kind of crazy. But they felt they were pushed to a certain point, that the revolution was around the corner. It would precipitate it if we set off some bombs. And they didn't have social media.
No.
They were just, and that happened. I mean, are we in a place, and this is an honest question, I don't know the answer to this question, that when you see some of these people that are carrying flags that have killed far more people than Israel would, I mean, in the existence of the country in an afternoon, if you're Mao, they're carrying these flags. Is it, are they going to be those people that get to that point?
I think that they certainly are shock jocks. And
I got to interrupt you because Oprah's on, and we got to see Miss Oprah Winfrey.
Pop off, queen.
Yeah.
Again and again and again, because I'm an American and that's what Americans do. Voting is the best of America. And I have always, since I was eligible to vote, I've always voted my values. And that is what is needed in this election now more than ever. So I'm calling on all you independents and all you undecideds. You know this is true. You know I'm telling you the truth, that values and character matter most of all. In leadership and in life. And more than anything, you know this is true, that decency and respect are on the ballot in 2024. And just plain common sense. Common sense tells you that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz can give us decency and respect. They're the ones that give it to us. So, we are Americans. We are Americans. Let us choose loyalty to the Constitution over loyalty to any individual. Because that's the best of America. And let us choose optimism over cynicism, because that's the best of America. And let us choose inclusion over retribution. Let us choose common sense over nonsense. Because that's the best of America. And let us choose the sweet promise of tomorrow over the bitter return to yesterday. We won't go back. We won't be set back, pushed back, bullied back, kicked back. We're not going back. Not going back. We're not going back. So, let us choose. Let us choose truth. Let us choose honor. And let us choose joy. Because that's the best of America. But more than anything else, let us choose freedom. Why? Because that's the best of America. We're all Americans, and together, let's all choose Kamala Harris. Thank you, Chicago. Thank you.
Wow.
You knew. You just
Oprah
wanted me to
Winfrey.
do it.
We are back. Oprah Winfrey doing some sort of show tunes. It's like, I'm going to ask you a question, Peter Savodnik.
That's great.
Coming soon.
I prefer it that way from now on.
I'm going to say that Batya said something.
Here's what I want people to know about Tim Walz. Well, everybody at Mankato West High School loves
I hate by billionaires. I hate it. And this is something that conservative billionaires, they don't lecture you. They shut up and they enjoy their money. And these people know they should not have this much money. And so they lecture you, and I hate it.
Was that a lecture, though? She was singing. Come on.
No,
I mean, we tuned in right when she was saying, get out there, independence.
Okay.
I think it was the Pritzker thing yesterday, the tone deafness. I'm a real billionaire.
Exactly.
Like, no, dude, that's not how you do it.
That was a bad moment.
That was a bad moment. But Oprah Winfrey, a very, very nice person who I once interviewed, and it seemed very humble. And while we were talking, a person disappeared. And I looked around. This person got down and changed Oprah's shoes for her while I was talking to her.
Wow.
You don't have a shoe changer?
I do, but I had to, inflation. I had to let them off. But it was so crazy because she was talking about a school that she had in the African school, and I was like, literally, there's someone changing your shoes. Nevertheless, she was a very nice person. Before we get back to Olivia telling us if there's going to be a bombing campaign from the radicals,
God forbid.
Not a ton of celebrities. I think they've done that deliberately. No. I mean, you can, as a Democrat, you could do only celebrities. John Legend's playing tonight.
Right.
And, you know, the Republicans have Lee Greenwood.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a good comparison.
But again, it begs the question. It begs the question, and I want to know what you all think about this. Why is it that all of these billionaires and celebrities are so heavily weighted on one side? Like, what's the source of that, Peter? What's your take on that?
I have no idea, actually. I mean, I think that.
You know, it didn't used to be this way in the 40s. Barbara Stanwyck was a Republican.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah,
that's unimaginable.
The 40s was almost a century ago, so I think it has been a long time.
But also in the 40s, there were a number of Stalinists in Hollywood too.
Yeah.
But it was presumed a long time ago that if you lived in a rich neighborhood, if you made a lot of money, you were a Republican.
And
right?
now 65% of people,
That's right.
65% of Americans.
This is her whole thing.
This is my whole thing.
Yeah.
65% of Americans who make more than $500,000 a year now are Democrats.
Right.
What is each of your take on why that is? We have to get to the bottom of this.
Me. Okay.
You're on TV now, Peter.
65% of the people who make over. I mean, it probably has to do with like the changing nature of our economy, like where people are making money, which industries are generating the highest paying jobs. And yes, please, you say something smarter than I just said.
Okay. Well, I guess first of all, like maybe they vote democratically, but I bet if you talk to a lot of these people and really were like, do you want to be paying for migrants to live in a hotel indefinitely in New York City? They might be like, I don't know. So I guess I would question whether or not they really buy, the most progressive elements.
I feel like the opposite. I feel like these people love paying higher taxes. They're so rich, and it's like an indulgence. It's like especially they love it when it's illegal immigrants.
But don't you think in private, they do break from the party in some ways?
This is true. This is true. I mean, because there's two questions here: is what you tell people and what you actually believe.
Yeah.
I think it makes them feel better about being so rich.
The Free Press, I'm sure, can attest to this. The Fifth Column can attest to this, the podcast that I do with our former guest, Camille Foster. People send you messages that are in Hollywood, in the music business, in the arts, like in New York City, like gallerists, artists who are like, I'm on your side. Do they say that publicly? Absolutely not, because number one, there's like the social cachet that you want. Number two, you want to work again. And I know people who have big businesses that are in New York City that they say, if I ever was revealed to even have one aberrant thought, I think I'd probably have a hard time.
But I would argue they're on your side culturally because you're against cancel culture and they hate feeling censored. But like economically, you're a free market person, so like of course like they like that stuff.
Yeah, I don't
They're
know
like,
if that's
why. Wouldn't they?
I think more the social stuff, the cancel culture stuff was a real wake up call to a lot of people, and a number of people who did things that were in their art, which then they were punished for. But I think one of the other things is geographic, right? I mean, you see people people who become famous who come from more rural areas, who didn't go to Yale and didn't go to Berkeley and didn't go to Stanford, tend to have different politics, I think. I mean, I can't prove that, but I know people that are smart people, successful people, but they're like from West Virginia, and they're going to have different politics.
Right. Okay, let's get back to Olivia was going to tell us about.
Speaking of rich radicals.
Yes, exactly.
Who is that? That's
the ones that you were following around.
Oh, actually, interestingly, I do think that this is a way more blue collar working class bunch. The Ivy League, what
does cheating mean? Just turning towards it more?
Encampment, intifada people did not show up. It was more kind of like Starbucks barista vibes, maybe did some community college. It was much more humble, actually.
The one person I talked to inside the arena for the Free Press that said to me, this is absolutely stunning to me. There were two students, very nice people, at an Ivy League school. And I said, what's the number one concern for you? These polls, like top 3 issues.
The
economy.
Uyghurs.
Yeah.
Right?
She was like hard Uyghur.
Yeah, absolutely.
Number 1, economy. Number 2, immigration. This is the general thing.
Wow.
Number 1, trans rights. She said that the number
We're not
one
talking
issue,
about it enough.
more important than the
By the
economy.
way,
Absolutely.
I think the universities might be failing us.
there has not been a single trans speaker. Did you guys notice that? There have been gay speakers, but not trans speakers, which makes me think that the Democrats understand that that's kind of where middle America is at. You have a lot of people who are basically the debate about gay marriage is over. I mean, the Republicans now support that.
Over by many years.
The trans issue is something that even most mainstream Democrats are not on board with. Peter,
Well,
do you not agree?
The debate over gay marriage is over, but I think also to a large extent the debate over trans rights is over in the sense that the Republican base is, I think, more or less where the Democratic base is at. And so, like,
Which is where?
I mean, look,
Explain
I've been
it.
to countless like Republican events, rallies, campaign events, and I've never ever heard a single person either on stage or just in the crowd ever disparage a trans person. The feeling is always the same, which is keep your ideas out of the schoolroom. You keep my kids or my grandchildren sort of away from this stuff. I want them inoculated from this. I don't want them exposed to all this. I want little boys to be able to grow up and then decide for themselves what they're going to be or whatever. And I think the thing is, most Democrats are probably aligned with that.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't really make any sense for the.
No, but it is interesting because the people, I feel like the delegates that I've spoken to and just the attendees, they do mention trans rights, but the party leadership that obviously plans the speakers and things like that, I would assume have looked at the numbers.
I mean, if you're like me and have a sort of libertarian attitude about trans people, I mean, I don't do whatever you want. I'm totally fine with all of it. One of our best, most devoted listeners to the column is trans. I try to use the pronouns. I screw them up every time. But I think that what you always have to realize when you're running a national party is that radicalism of any sort, revolutionary ideologies never work. And what's happened, I think that Peter is right, that we're pulling back in some ways from the more extreme elements of that movement that a lot of the media, including the place where I used to work, would give them a lot of column inches.
But I don't know.
But that's such a small bit of a small group of people. And I think that it was like, okay, you had your time. Nobody likes that. Nobody likes that.
I think that's how that appears during the DNC, because obviously they want the party to appear unified. But I think once they actually have to get out there and compete, for Michigan, let's say, I think we could see something different.
I think so. Explain why.
Because these people, so the protests this week have been smaller than expected, but I don't know what will happen when kids go back to school. Like I said, the people who showed up, I think, are a more blue collar working class crowd. But I think once the Ivy Leaguers get back in school, they create content based around this. I mean, I've seen videos that at Barnard or Columbia, they're already kind of giving students that are simply moving into the university that the protesting students belong to. They're giving them a hard time. They're already finding opportunities to protest. So I think that this movement could pick back up in the fall closer to Election Day.
Yeah.
And they do pose an unanswered question. I actually spoke to Democrats inside the arena who feel a little queasy voting for Kamala because of what they perceive her Israel policy is.
Yeah, I think. Well, I'm sorry. Go on.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think one way of looking at the protesters is as like a leading indicator of where the party is headed, and I think part of what wound up paradoxically sort of undermining the protest movement or the protesters outside the United Center is that the party, like today's Democratic Party, is much more amenable to or open to sort of radical ideas than the Democratic Party in 1968. So there was this, very, very sharp division between sort of like the party faithful, people inside the hall in 1968 and the people outside. And so there was a kind of an inevitable kind of clash. But I think today, the cordons of security notwithstanding, you have people inside the hall like, Rashida Tlaib or the rest of the squad or,
Ilhan Omar.
Or just like, I think a lot of Democrats in general who are a lot more sort of open to, kind of radical ideas, and so that winds up sort of like taking a lot of the wind out of their sails. So yeah, I guess there's room for people to protest, but like, do they really need to protest that much when you have people inside the hall who are...
They're being listened to
Yeah,
inside
they're being
the hall.
heard.
That's a really good point. We've got Pete Buttigieg on right now.
Oh, great.
Let's take a listen to that if we can.
Batya, do we want
The
to?
message is that they
Mayor
are
Pete, put him
doubling
on.
down
Secretary.
negativity and grievance. Committing to a concept of campaigning best summed up in one word: darkness. Darkness is what they are selling. The thing is, I just don't believe that America today is in the market for darkness. I believe America is ready for a better kind of politics. Yes, politics at its worst can be ugly, crushing, demeaning, but it doesn't have to be. At its best, politics can be empowering, uplifting. It can even be a kind of soul craft. My faith teaches me that the world isn't made up of good people and bad people, but rather that each of us is capable of good and bad things. And I believe leaders matter because of what they bring out in each of us, the good or the bad. Right now, the other side is appealing to what is smallest within you. They're telling you that greatness comes from going back to the past. They're telling you that anyone different from you is a threat. They're telling you that your neighbor or nephew or daughter who disagrees with you politically isn't just wrong, but is now the enemy. I believe in a better politics, one that finds us at our most decent and open and brave. The kind of politics that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are offering. And as you have felt these many days, that kind of politics also just feels better to be part of. There is joy in it, as well as power. And if all of that sounds naive, let me insist that I have come to this view not by way of idealism, but by way of experience. Not just the experience of my unlikely career. Someone like me serving in Indiana, serving in Washington, serving in uniform. I'm thinking of something much more basic. I'm thinking of dinner time at our house in Michigan. When the dog is barking and the air fryer is beeping and the mac and cheese is boiling over, and it feels like all the political negotiating experience in the world is not enough for me to get our 3-year-old son and our 3-year-old daughter to just wash their hands and sit at the table. It's the part of our day when politics seems the most distant, and yet the makeup of our kitchen table, the existence of my family, is just one example of something that was literally impossible as recently as 25 years ago, when an anxious teenager growing up in Indiana wondered if he would ever find belonging in this world. This kind of life went from impossible to possible, from possible to real, from real to almost ordinary in less than half a lifetime. But that didn't just happen. It was brought about through idealism and courage, through organizing and persuasion and storytelling, and yes, through politics, the right kind of politics, the kind of politics that can make an impossible dream into an everyday reality. I don't presume to know what it's like in your kitchen, but I know, as sure as I am standing here, that everything in it, the bills you pay at that table, the shape of the family that sits there, the fears and the dreams that you talk about late into the night there, all of it compels us to demand more from our politics than a rerun of some TV wrestling death match. So this November, We get to choose. We get to choose our president. We get to choose our policies, but most of all, we will choose a better politics. A politics that calls us to our better selves and offers us a better everyday. That is what Kamala Harris and Tim Walz represents. That is what Democrats represent. That is what awaits us when America decides to end Trump's politics of darkness once and for all. That is what we choose when we embrace the leaders who are out there building bridges and reject the ones who are out there banning books. This is what we will work for every day to November and beyond. So let's go win this. Thank you, Democrats. Thank you.
Welcome back.
Reactions?
Michael Moynihan, Batya, Ungar-Sargon, Peter Savotnik, and whatever your name is. Olivia Reingold. It's a full Free Press team here. What did we just watch?
Guys, reaction. Come on.
That was a perfect PowerPoint, DNC speech. It was everything was timed
Like
perfectly.
AI.
He hit all of his points. Like it was crisp. It was, and he was very, it was kind of inspiring. Like it was the right, tonal shift. The problem, and I guess who just hasn't been watching that closely over the past decade, is that it sounded totally authentic. I'm sure there's like something heartfelt, buried deep inside. The crispness, the kind of like the careful plodding from one bullet point to the next.
That's for the movement, and that's how you end up leading the DOD, right?
That's exactly how you want to.
We need a guy like that to make the train run.
Yeah. There's a reason,
I like that you just called him Mussolini, but not really. It's a subterranean Mussolini.
Can we drop down? I was like, what is missing that Obama has, let's say?
I know.
Yeah, that is a
I
great
have
point.
the answer,
Okay.
which is why they pay me so
Yeah.
an exorbitant salary.
Yeah.
No, the thing about that you see with Obama, the cadence is right. He feels like he believes it. There's a moment, and when you're watching a Trump speech, you ever have the moment like, is he using a prompter? Because he looks like he's not using a prompter. He's just talking. He is. Pete Buttigieg did the thing that every half-assed politician does. At the end of the speech to rouse the crowd, he just speaks louder. No emotion. It's just a louder Pete Buttigieg. There's nothing in it. There's no feeling.
No, I feel like you just basically what you just said is like you believe Obama more. But why?
It doesn't matter what he says. It doesn't matter. It's why he wins elections.
This is not very scientific here, but Obama appears to be a better hang. He Buttigieg, not a good hang, right?
Yes.
It's just that Obama takes risks in his speeches. Like he says things that
he made a dick joke.
At the DNC.
Right.
But not just that. He also not so subtly, was criticizing sort of the progressive flank of his own party and saying enough with he didn't use this language, but it's sort of enough with your illegal tendencies.
Yes.
That's a risk. There was nothing that Buttigieg said there. It was not perfectly kind of calibrated to placate everyone there. And the thing is, everyone knows that. They feel it. It's like they're nodding along.
It was phoned in. Like he literally said, we need a better politics, a more inspiring politics.
We shall go forward, not go back in the time machine.
We should want things that are good.
Yeah, they go back a little bit.
As Donald Trump stan, it's the language, right? Stan, that means somebody who's obsessed with somebody, right? A lover of Donald Trump, tattoos of him on your neck. The one thing that surprises me about every other candidate and politician is they spend all of their time excoriating him, and no time learning from him. And the thing that you should learn from Donald Trump, and it's the most important lesson, is that he's funny. Full stop. I mean, Shane Gillis, the comedian, said in his last special after Biden was like, he said, can we all admit that Donald Trump is funny now? And it's like, we couldn't have admitted it before, but that was a kind of a poisonous thing. We also couldn't admit that Melania was a very attractive first lady. No one pointed this out. Model first lady, no one talked about it. But the thing with Trump is that you saw him on Theo Vaughn's show?
Yeah.
One of the most hilarious bits of television where he becomes the interviewer.
Right.
Talking about cocaine. He's totally mystified by cocaine. He has great comic timing. There's no, Obama's the closest, right? Is there anybody on the Democratic side who is funny beyond him and non-elected official like James Carville? I think has a good.
Well, and to add to that question, so Olivia, like, have you heard anything here that you think would make people in your generation be like, oh, these people understand what we're going through and what we're facing?
Phenomenon or whatever.
Oh my God.
Is that, I mean,
I don't know what that means.
Do you think
I still don't know what it means.
that people are going to vote on vibe, like younger people, or I mean, you guys have real real economic problems.
Oh, yeah.
Is there anything that
You've got a lot of problems.
I know 0 people who are homeowners. Okay, what would make them vote?
No, I'm saying, was there anything here that you feel was pitched specifically at your generation?
No, I don't think so at all. I actually don't think so at all. I don't think anyone has really talked about what it's like for people who I feel like what's going on here is they're only trying to reach their idea of the working class. I feel like they're not really addressing the fact that the middle class is hollowed out. And when they address the upper class, it's only because they need to be taxed out the wazoo. And so really the only people who I feel like are being spoken to are people who literally can't eat, people who can't put food on the table. But there are a bunch of people, a lot of people I know who can eat. In fact, they probably eat sweet green a lot of the time, but are light years, despite being maybe white collar workers, are light years away from ever owning a home or things like that. Anyway, there are a bunch of different versions of that. Just people who feel like they did everything right to do better than their parents and at least stay in the middle class. And I don't think there's anyone who is telling that story.
Isn't that weird for a DNC that's supposed to be we're the party of young people, that there's nothing being pitched at young people except celebs, billionaire celebs?
I mean, it's scream confidence in their hammerlock on the vote of young people. And they've had that for a long time. And that has been shifting, as you've seen, with Donald Trump. But there is the presumption always that there is going to be, these are our constituents, and it might change when they get older, but right now our constituents will always be there. I think there's a real thought that is the case.
I also just don't think they want to acknowledge economic policy, because then you have to deal with the fact that inflation is what it is.
Right.
And anyone discussing just how expensive things are, you have to, some of that responsibility has to fall on Biden and therefore Kamala. Yeah.
Peter, do you think this is being pitched differently than other conventions vis-a-vis young people?
Well, I think what is interesting is that at the Republican convention last month, there was a lot of talk about, a lot of talk that was targeting younger people. I mean, we heard this from, J.D. Vance, Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Amber Rose. Come on,
Yes, Katie Britt. Yeah. I mean, I'm talking about the would-be president. Yes, her too.
Okay, sure.
They all talked about sort of the difficulty of securing a mortgage, or there was inflation. That's a more short-term concern. But there are these bigger structural issues like, will you ever own a piece of real estate? Will you be able to afford college for your children? And then the bigger picture of will your children be better off than you are? I think a lot of them sort of understand that they won't be as well off as their parents were. There was much more, I think, at least in the RNC, it seemed to me, the sort of acknowledgement of sort of the very steep climb that younger Americans are faced with. I think a lot of that has to do with who is now running the Democratic Party, who runs the Republican Party, and as has been talked about a lot. You've talked about this, Batya. The Republican Party is a much more, sort of middle working class party now, and increasingly the Democratic Party and the DNC feels like sort of a production of the managerial class. It feels like it's very, I mean, the DNC is a much better party. It's excellently produced. It's slick. It's fun. It's flashy. The DNC. It's full of the flashing lights. Yeah, right. Exactly. Like Kid Rock. They got John Legend, and the Republicans like Kid Rock, right? I mean, everything about the RNC was kind of like, it's sort of like a sad throwback. It's like, can't we just go back to being just Spicoli? Whereas, the Democrats are great at putting on like a show. Like the roll call last night was actually kind of entertaining, which is weird.
DJ.
Yes.
Yeah. There's Little John.
Yeah. But like that, all that is like weirdly kind of camouflages or masks the fact that there's almost zero discussion at the DNC of what these people want to accomplish.
Right.
So here's the thing, and this is a question that I've been rolling around in my head because obviously Kamala Harris is in the honeymoon period. She's getting a big bump in the polls, and it happens, I don't know if this is correlation or causation, to not be talking to the press, which, by the way, also should talk about the fact that the press doesn't seem to care that she's not talking to the press.
Right.
And people say this is a great strategy. I'm not so sure about it. And the reason I'm not so sure about it is you're going to get the exhale bump. Because
right.
Every Democrat was like, geez, Joe Biden, that's not. But if you want to be the party of young people, of the working class, the people that like, we're going to lift you up. You can buy a home with these policies, whatever it might be. You have to affirmatively make that case to them. You're going to get the bump, but you're saying, yeah, this is great. If we don't talk to anyone, we're not going to go down one single point. That is not, it's going to change. But I think that there's also a thing that when you're out there making points and not saying price gauging instead of price gouging, Lord, this person's unprepared.
That's kind of mistake I make. But
you're not running for president.
We were all at the RNC. Yeah. So here's, I think, the main difference to me so far, and it's granted it's day 3, she hasn't spoken yet, but at the RNC, I'm curious if you guys agree with me. There was no moment at which it was not very clear to anyone there why you would vote for this party. Like, how they are going to make your life easier. Like every day had a theme. The first one was affordability. The second one was safety. And then there was immigration. Like it was very clear who they were talking to and how they were going to how they were telling you, we're going to make your life better in this way. At the DNC, it seems like the reason to vote for Kamala Harris is because a bunch of extremely wealthy, successful, famous people are telling you to.
Basically, and that's basically right.
I think it appears to you that way because the RNC message, you walk in there and you're like, these are my people. Like, I think it's just because the message resonates.
So what is the message here?
I spoke to a lot of Democratic voters today asking just very basic questions like, why are you a Democrat? What Kamala policy are you excited about? And like at least half of people actually had really specific policies. Like I mean, I didn't have time to fact check them, but they named stuff, about housing, like actually about housing. But I think you're right. I think you're right though that they're operating based on. I think they're playing. I think she's not giving interviews because she knows that so many people are just voting based on a referendum of Trump. I actually think it is kind of a good strategy. If I were her head of comms, I would literally be like, do minimal interviews, only speak to friendly press, because I do think that there are so many people. I think that's a huge reason why more protesters didn't show up, because they're like not as motivated now that they have Kamala. They really were against Biden. And so I think that there are, of course, voters whose opinions could change. There are votes that are in play, but I think it's a huge risk for her to.
There's a small number now, and I will do a John McLaughlin group end to this, which you wouldn't know because you're too young. Olivia Reingold, wrong. All right, we've been talking about Barack Obama quite a bit. We're gonna play a little clip of Barack Obama, who wrote a book, a good book actually, called Dreams from My Father, but this is Barack Obama talking about his grandmother.
I also think one of the reasons Mary and I became so close was she reminded me of my grandmother, the woman who helped raise me as a child. And on the surface, the two of them did not have a lot in common. One was a black woman from right here, south side of Chicago, right down the way. Went to Englewood High School. The other was a little old white lady born in a tiny town called Peru, Kansas. Now, I know there aren't that many people from Peru. No nation, no society has ever tried to build a democracy as big and as diverse as ours before. One that includes people that over decades have come from every corner of the globe. One where our allegiances and our community are defined not by race or blood, but by a common creed. We live in a time of such confusion and rancor, with a culture that puts a premium on things that don't last. Money, fame, status, likes. We chase the approval of strangers on our phones. We build all manner of walls and fences around ourselves, and then we wonder why we feel so alone. We don't trust each other as much because we don't take the time to know each other. And in that space between us, politicians and algorithms teach us to caricature each other and troll each other and fear each other. But here's the good news, Chicago. All across America, in big cities and small towns, away from all the noise, the ties that bind us together are still there.
Welcome back, everybody. We're so excited to have you here with us. And joining us is Senator Nina Turner, former state senator from Ohio, former Bernie Sanders surrogate, a woman that I admire very, very deeply, even though there are many things we don't agree about.
You're not supposed to say that in the intro.
And I am so grateful to you. You've written for me at Newsweek and helped me understand a side of politics that is very, very important to our nation. I feel like we are in a we together, and that is so much more important than anything happening in any other place on earth. And so I'm so grateful to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you both.
So you're a floor delegate for Ohio.
Yes.
You're very vocal for the uncommitted vote and that cause. Are you supporting Kamala Harris? Are you going to vote for her? How do you see a role in this moment?
Well, I'm waiting to see more policy rollouts. I'm not one of those Democrats that are jumping to it. I want to make sure that material conditions for everyday people in this country change. So far, some of the economic things that she has rolled out, we need more details. But, you know, I'm pretty pleased with those. In terms of the uncommitted, I mean, right now there's a sit-in happening with the uncommitted voters right now, just kind of spontaneously, because the DNC allowed, rightfully so, a Jewish family to talk about their son that was maimed and also kidnapped and is still held there now, 320 days, I believe. And it was such a touching and moving speech. And one of the things the parents said, and I'm a parent, so I was starting to tear up. I have a son, and I'm tearing up that, and I'm paraphrasing them, the hostages must be returned, and there must be a type of liberty and justice for everybody impacted. Now I'm paraphrasing them, but it was such a moving and inclusive, recognizing Palestinian lives, but also talking about their pain. It's not a but, talking about their pain as parents because they have not seen their son. And the hostages must be returned, and there should be a permanent ceasefire and a path to real peace, justice for both peoples. Now, the DNC, though, decided not to allow a vetted, they asked for a vetted, the uncommitted said vet a Palestinian and allow them a chance to speak so that the members of the DNC could hear, you know, both pains. People are suffering. And the DNC said no. So now the uncommitted voters are sitting in.
Why did they do that? And it was a vetted speech. I mean, the speech they would have
every
seen it
speech is vetted, right? Exactly.
And my understanding was that the person they had chosen was going to come out and support Kamala Harris. Mm-hmm. Why did they say no?
I don't know. I have some speculation. It might be unfair to speculate. So I don't know. I will say that I think it is wrong. And if they want to win, we know that the uncommitted voters started with President Biden, obviously, when she becomes officially the nominee tomorrow night. She has to wear some of that. I don't think that their request is unreasonable by any stretch of the imagination. If they want to win, if Democrats want to win, they are going to have to answer the cries of the uncommitted movement.
The DNC is, a pretty formidable organization. I mean, you work for
a
Bernie
private
Sanders,
corporation.
a private corporation, which is what Marianne Williamson said.
Yeah.
When you are somebody who is on the kind of more left wing of the Democratic Party, uncommitted, talking about the Palestinian issue, how do you feel that they treat you and deal with that dissent within the party?
They don't. They
just ignore it.
They ignore it, but at their own peril. President Biden, I mean, we elect presidents in this country via the Electoral College. It's not going to be the popular vote. Michigan, President Biden barely won.
Yeah.
We got Wisconsin. These are about 5 or 6 key states that they can't afford to lose any margins. You got 100,000 voters come out in an uncontested primary and vote uncommitted. You have in Michigan, you have 50,000 in Wisconsin. You start adding up those voters. I don't think those voters are necessarily going to go to Trump because Trump and Biden hold similar policy positions on the state of Israel. But what is going to happen is they're going to alienate those voters and they won't come out to vote. And the Electoral College, it matters.
Do you want to watch a little bit of Vice
Sure.
President?
I was like, this is.
We're all here tonight for one beautiful, simple reason. We love this country. So thank you to all of you here in Chicago and all of you watching at home tonight. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for your determination. And most of all, thank you for bringing the joy to this fight. Now, I grew up in Butte, Nebraska, a town of 400 people. I had 24 kids in my high school class, and none of them went to Yale. But I'll tell you what, growing up in a small town like that, you learn how to take care of each other. That family down the road, they may not think like you do. They may not pray like you do. They may not love like you do, but they're your neighbors. And you look out for them, and they look out for you. Everybody belongs, and everybody has a responsibility to contribute. For me, it was serving in the Army National Guard. I joined up 2 days after my 17th birthday, and I proudly wore our nation's uniform for 24 years. My dad, a Korean War era Army veteran, died of lung cancer a couple years later. He left behind a mountain of medical debt. Thank God for Social Security survivor benefits. And thank God for the GI Bill that allowed my dad and me to go to college, and millions of other Americans. Eventually, like the rest of my family, I fell in love with teaching. Three out of 4 of us married teachers. I wound up teaching social studies and coaching football at Mankato West High School. Go Scarlets! We ran a 44 defense. We played through to the whistle on every single play, and we even won a state championship. Never closed the yearbook, people. But it was those players and my students who inspired me to run for Congress. They saw in me what I had hoped to instill in them, a commitment to the common good, an understanding that we're all in this together, and the belief that a single person can make a real difference for their neighbors. So there I was, a 40-something high school teacher with little kids, zero political experience, and no money, running in a deep red district. But you know what? Never underestimate a public school teacher. Never. I represented my neighbors in Congress for 12 years, and I learned an awful lot. I learned how to work across the aisle on issues like growing the rural economies and taking care of veterans. And I learned how to compromise without compromising my values. Then I came back to serve as governor, and we got right to work making a difference in our neighbors' lives. We cut taxes for the middle class. We passed paid family and medical leave. We invested in fighting crime and affordable housing. We cut the cost of prescription drugs and helped people escape the kind of medical debt that nearly sank my family. And we made sure that every kid in our state gets breakfast and lunch every day. So while other states were banning books from their schools, we were banishing hunger from ours. We also protected reproductive freedom because in Minnesota, we respect our neighbors and the personal choices they make. And even if we wouldn't make those same choices for ourselves, we've got a golden rule. Mind your own damn business. And that includes IVF and fertility treatments. And this is personal for Gwen and I. If you've never experienced the hell that is infertility, I guarantee you, you know somebody who has. And I can remember praying each night for a phone call. The pit in your stomach when the phone had rang, and the absolute agony when we heard the treatments hadn't worked. It took Gwen and I years, but we had access to fertility treatments. And when our daughter was born, we named her Hope. Hope, Gus, and Gwen, you are my entire world, and I love you. I'm letting you in on how we started a family because this is a big part about what this election is about. Freedom. When Republicans use the word freedom, they mean that the government should be free to invade your doctor's office. Corporations free to pollute your air and water. And banks free to take advantage of customers. But when we Democrats talk about freedom, we mean the freedom to make a better life for yourself and the people that you love. Freedom to make your own healthcare decisions. And yeah, your kids' freedom to go to school without worrying about being shot dead in the hall. Look, I know guns. I'm a veteran. I'm a hunter. And I was a better shot than most Republicans in Congress, and I got the trophies to prove it. But I'm also a dad. I believe in the Second Amendment, but I also believe our first responsibility is to keep our kids safe. That's what this is all about. The responsibility we have to our kids, to each other, and to the future that we're building together, in which everyone is free to build the kind of life they want. But not everyone has that same sense of responsibility. Some folks just don't understand what it takes to be a good neighbor. Take Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Their Project 2025 will make things much, much harder for people who are just trying to live their lives. They spent a lot of time pretending they know nothing about this. But look, I coached high school football long enough to know, and trust me on this, when somebody takes the time to draw up a playbook, they're going to use it. And we know if these guys get back in the White House, they'll start jacking up the costs on the middle class. They'll repeal the Affordable Care Act. They'll gut Social Security and Medicare. And they will ban abortion across this country with or without Congress. Here's the thing. It's an agenda nobody asked for. It's an agenda that serves nobody except the richest and the most extreme amongst us. And it's an agenda that does nothing for our neighbors in need. Is it weird? Absolutely. Absolutely. But it's also wrong. And it's dangerous. It's not just me saying so. It's Trump's own people. They were with him for 4 years. They're warning us that the next 4 years will be much, much worse. You know, when I was teaching every year, we'd elect a student body president. And you know what? Those teenagers could teach Donald Trump a hell of a lot about what a leader is. Leaders don't spend all day insulting people and blaming others. Leaders do the work. So I don't know about you. I'm ready to turn the page on these guys. So go ahead, say it with me. We're not going back. We've got something better to offer the American people. It starts with our candidate, Kamala Harris. From her first day as a prosecutor, as a district attorney, as an attorney general, as a United States senator, and then our vice president, she's fought on the side of the American people. She's taken on the predators and fraudsters. She's taken down the transnational gangs, and she stood up to powerful corporate interests. She has never hesitated to reach across that aisle if it meant improving your lives. And she's always done it with energy, with passion, and with joy. Folks, we've got a chance to make Kamala Harris the next president of the United States. But I think we owe it to the American people to tell them exactly what she'd do as president before we ask them for their votes. So here, this is the part, clip and save it and send it to your undecided relatives so they know. If you're a middle-class family or a family trying to get into the middle class, Kamala Harris is going to cut your taxes. If you're getting squeezed by prescription drug prices, Kamala Harris is going to take on Big Pharma. If you're hoping to buy a home, Kamala Harris is going to help make it more affordable. And no matter who you are, Kamala Harris is going to stand up and fight for your freedom to live the life that you want to lead. Because that's what we want for ourselves, and it's what we want for our neighbors. You know, you might not know it, but I haven't given a lot of big speeches like this. But I have given a lot of pep talks. So let me finish with this, team. It's the fourth quarter. We're down a field goal, but we're on offense and we've got the ball. We're driving down the field. And boy, do we have the right team. Kamala Harris is tough. Kamala Harris is experienced, and Kamala Harris is ready. Our job our job for everyone watching is to get in the trenches and do the blocking and tackling. 1 inch at a time, 1 yard at a time, 1 phone call at a time, 1 door knock at a time, 1 $5 donation at a time. Look, we got 76 days. That's nothing. There'll be time to sleep when you're dead. We're going to leave it on the field. That's how we'll keep moving forward. That's how we'll turn the page on Donald Trump. That's how we'll build a country where workers come first. Healthcare and housing are human rights. And the government stays the hell out of your bedroom. That's how we make America a place where no child is left hungry, where no community is left behind, where nobody gets told they don't belong. That's how we're gonna fight. And as the next president of the United States always says, when we fight, when we fight, when we fight, thank you. God bless.
All right. That was possibly a future Vice President Tim Walz. You know, I was looking at you. No, no.
But you look at,
I was like, I wasn't trying to.
You were looking at me.
I was trying to like check. I was like, what is she? But I saw a head nod on "No child will be hungry," and I didn't see a lot of other head nods. Is that a fair assessment?
It's fair. I mean, I think in this country we should have universal breakfast and lunch. It's a shame that we don't. We are a hegemonic nation. I was kind of trying to take him in a little bit to try to figure out, where he was going. The reason why I kind of hesitated a little is because the Biden-Harris, the vice president is both running for president, but also is tied to the Biden administration. And so all of these wonderful things that my fellow Democrats are talking about, they could have done, especially in the first 2 years of the Biden administration. I don't want to hear nothing about cinema. I don't want to hear nothing about mansion. You carry a big stick. You need to walk softly, carry a big stick. There's a way to try to get members of your party to try to do the right thing. It's called negotiation. It's called, hey, I'm going to rain down on you if you don't. So the fact that they did not pass increasing the federal minimum wage in the first 2 years of the Biden administration to $7.25 for well over a decade troubles me. And then they blamed it on parliamentarians. Paid family medical leave, why don't we have it? So those things trouble me. So I know that this is a cheerleading fest. I'm just a different kind of Democrat. So I'm going to take them at face value that when she's in the first chair and he's in the second chair, they're going to do a new thing, because it is important for our viewers to understand she's the vice president, so you got to march to the drum, to the beat of the president. But I've just heard these things over housing and healthcare is a right. Well, yeah, it is a right. So why don't we have universal healthcare? Why, as a country, are we allowing corporations to gobble up property in this nation to drive up rents and price people out of being able to live in the communities where they grew up? Hello, Chicago. Hello, New York, Seattle, places like that. So, no, you saw me right. And then the Project 2025, this drives me absolutely insane. I want to know where the Democrats' Project 2025 is. It's one thing to point out that the Republicans have a plan to destroy this country and take us backwards. Once you tell me that, I want to know what your plan is to move the country forward. I don't see that in the Democrats, and I see it, this Project 2025. We should be concerned, but I see it as a scare tactic.
I mean, I think you're right about that, particularly in the Project 2025 stuff. But does it bother you that, these are the things that you say need to be enumerated by Kamala Harris and by this campaign? Sure. And she's not talking to the media because the poll number's been going up.
She didn't come to the free press.
we asked.
Man, I'm about to make a call
can you call her
right now?
I think you can you WhatsApp her right now? Yeah, I mean she's gonna come. But but that's. Do you think that she should be out there talking policy and not saying, you know what, I'm floating right now. Let's see if I can remain floating for a little
And
while.
just to add to that,
Yes.
so she does seem to be headed policy-wise in the opposite direction than what you might want, right? I mean, in 2019, she was much more radical on every single one of the issues that she spoke to. Everything we've heard so far this round is a kind of moderation. So I guess my question is, does that worry you? But also, I mean, why are you still a Democrat given, I mean, your experience with Bernie Sanders, your experience here, explain that to us.
I probably need my head examined. Einstein defined insanity. I'm trying. There's so many faithful that want people like me to stay and to raise hell. Two major parties, unfortunately, in this country, not a whole lot of room yet. I hope one day, and I hope I live to see it, to have an independent party. I just want to raise hell inside. So there's some people on the outside. For now, I'm on the inside. Who knows if I'll stay. But I do feel at times like I'm beating my head up against the wall. They rigged the election against Senator Bernard Sanders in 2016. They rigged the election against him in 2020. We all may remember when the top 4 or 5 candidates all coalesced around, or the top four candidates coalesced around the vice president at that time, Biden, who was not doing very well. But they all got a call. So they jumped the race, and they jumped out of the race and all got behind President Biden.
It's a,
So it's a legitimate question. I don't know.
But is there anything, I mean, so for example, I mean, I'm hung up on this, but so the head of the Teamsters was welcomed at the RNC and gave the most progressive speech of any convention in the last, 30 years, right? Something like that. He yelled at Republicans for 25 minutes about how to treat workers better. And for that crime, he was ghosted and disinvited from the DNC. I mean, is there any moment at which you would give the Republican Party in its new populist iteration a second look, or is that totally
They're faux populist. I mean, they not real.
You don't buy it.
The one thing that I do agree, you didn't see me, I was kind of taking it in, is when the governor talked about the type of freedom that Republicans want us to have.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want us to be free to really chart a path that is progressive. They want they want a type of freedom that continues to divide people in this country. I think he was absolutely right about that. Today's Republican Party is nowhere near where the Lincoln Party, where Lincoln was, and even back then it wasn't perfect, but the radical Republicans, I mean, they do have a history. They were the ones that stood up against chattel slavery of my ancestors, and it was the Democrats that wanted to enslave us. I don't necessarily think parties have switched places, as I hear all the time. I just think that both parties are captured by corporate interests.
Mm-hmm.
And that pains me greatly. And I wish that the American people had another choice. They don't have it yet, but I think they might have it one day. So no, I can't look at the Republicans, especially the federal ones, because they
What's your read on why so many Black men, Hispanic voters have found in Trump something to admire, something even to vote for?
Well, Madam Editor, I'm glad you asked me that question. For me, the Democratic Party emasculates Black men. And I think Hispanic men probably feel the same way. And I say this because they weaponize identity. When and where we enter, who we are, how we identify is important to who we are, just like our fingerprints. But if you're not going to use my identity to advance a social justice cause, and you're just going to use my identity as a blunt force object, now I got a problem. And so what the Democratic Party does, they put Black women on a pedestal and they say, we're the mothers of the movement, or we saved the party. But yet you don't put forth policies that save Black babies. You don't put forth policies that deal with the maternal death rate of Black women and Black babies in the United States of America. You don't do those things that lift and edify. Yes, identity is important. Both parties use it differently. Republicans use it to say that everybody Black or brown or of a mixed race is somehow kind of way a DEI hire. They use it to say certain books will be banned. Don't tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about how this country was formulated because you might hurt a white child's feelings by saying that, yeah, chattel slavery existed, and oh, by the way, white powerful folks stole the land from the indigenous people. So all of those things, Chinese Exclusion Act, I mean, we can go down the list. But Democrats use it in a way that alienates other folks, and it offends me. So when I talk to black men across this country, they don't see themselves in this party. It's one thing to recognize the power and prowess of black women and the sacrifices that we make. It is another thing to put us above black men. The black struggle, black men and black women have to be together. We don't have the luxury to be separated, and so I resent the Democratic Party for doing that. And so black men do not see themselves in the party. That bravado, you know, because we got a kind of masculine energy, and masculine energy is not all bad, but the type of bravado that Trump puts forward is still very much rooted in a hierarchical patriarchy, and a lot of men gravitate to that.
Yeah, I mean, so is it, I mean, you feel in a way, it's tokenization in a way if they don't pay any attention to it, right?
If it the mic, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Yes.
We're falling apart at the end of the night. But that's, I mean, that's essentially.
That's exactly it.
Is it a thing that I've seen, you know, a lot of people, and you know, particularly certain kind of left-wing scholars say that, yeah, we've focused on identity for a long time, and it's been a lot of words at the expense of class. Class is an important element, and that is not something the Democratic Party wants to deal with. You said this about Bernie Sanders, and I talked to him about this before. You know, everyone knows that, you know, they thumbed the scale, to put it very mildly, in, you know, 2016.
They put bodies on the
They put
scale.
bodies on the scale, right? There's a follow-up question that I think everyone thinks that we presume that we know the answer to this. Why? Why is the Democratic Party, you know, trying to box out somebody who's very popular, his policies are very popular, he's a very effective speaker, he has this kind of consistency that you don't have a conversation, well, Kamala Harris said this in 2020, she says this now, because this is the direction of the party. Why is the party afraid of somebody who could actually win? It's not like you're wasting time with somebody who can't win. I think Bernie Sanders could have won.
He could have beat Trump. I believe that. They're opposite ends of the spectrum. Trump is a faux populist. Senator Bernie Sanders is a real populist who really believes in the power of the people. I think they fear it because both political parties, private organizations, I want our viewers to understand this, that control our electoral system are captured. So you have corporate capture of both major parties. And so corporations don't want us to have health care for all. Corporations don't want us to drive down the cost of pharmaceutical drugs so that we can pay the same amount that our sisters and brothers in Canada, by way of example, pay. They don't want that. And so these corporations spend billions of collective dollars every single year to lobby members of the Congress and the people running for the presidency so that they can stay in control. It is very simple. Just follow the money. Follow who's donating the money, how much money they're donating, how these corporations are investing multi-millions of dollars that adds up to billions of dollars collectively to really, bribery is legal in the United States of America. So the reason why they didn't want somebody like Senator Bernard Sanders, because he really was going to do his best to put the power in the hands of the people and hold corporate interests responsible. We need real campaign finance reform in this country if we're ever going to get some of the nice things that people like myself and Senator Sanders and others were and still are fighting for.
There's been something, to go back to the uncommitted Gaza conversation, there's been something happening that it seems to me kind of like one of these social media phenomenon, but maybe has a deeper truth in it, where over the last couple weeks since Harris became the nominee, you've seen sort of Black influencers and activists and the pro-Palestine influencers and activists kind of, there's a split emerging to where you're seeing a lot of frustration that I think is pretty just on behalf of the Black activists who are saying, look, it's our time to think about our needs right now, which are extremely pressing, and then a lot of frustration by the Palestinian side of things saying, well, how dare you abandon us in this moment, you know? I'm curious what you think about that, and that sort of whether there is a natural connection between the Black struggle here and, you know, whether that energy that's being expended on this issue in the Middle East is not taking away from more pressing issues here at home.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. Congresswoman Tlaib and I penned an op-ed about the similarities or the connection, the connective tissue between the Black liberation struggle and the liberation struggle of Palestinians. We know that President Nelson Mandela, when he was alive, he talked a lot about that struggle, humanizing the Palestinians. So did Minister Malcolm X and countless other leaders, but I'm naming those two in particular. This is more than one thing can be true at once. And I think with my community, because I don't know if she's Palestinian or Arab American, but she came at me. And I'm one of the biggest allies.
That's crazy.
And I had to go in there. You know, my team don't like me going in there, but I went in there and said, how dare you. She had some choice words for me, and then she ended it with, please shut up. Okay, now the first thing that you're not going to do is tell me, a Black woman with agency, to shut up. Now, I've been told to shut up a lot of times by people on Twitter who would never say those things to my face, but it is a microaggression. I take it very personally that you're telling a Black woman with agency that I need to shut up. More poignantly, to your point, both things are true. While the Black community feels very much abandoned by this country, and we don't have similar allyship, and what I mean by that is that the Black liberation struggle has allowed the liberation of every other marginalized person. Just follow it. Economically, socially, politically. As Black people fight for liberation, every other group gets that same liberation. But the same love and respect is not given to Black people. You have groups of people, and I'm speaking very generally, so folks don't be atting free press and all of that. I am making a generic
they're
statement.
adding free press right now.
Right?
Yes.
Because I want to be clear that I am making a generic statement. That the same love and commitment to the struggle of Black Americans whose ancestors were chattel slaves on this land is not shown. Now, do we have some folks that stand by our side every now and then? Yeah, but I'm talking about deep-seated, we gonna be with our Black sisters and brothers because we see our liberation through them. I don't think any other group in this country can be liberated without full Black liberation. So Black people are offended. And when you have Arab Americans, some, who would, in my grandmother's words, fix their mouths to tell Black people that we need to be on the front line of their struggle, that is offensive. Now, there are a lot of Black people on the front line of the struggle. I'm one of them. Dr. Cornel West is another. They're numerous. But what you cannot do, Arab Americans or any other group, is to tell Black people what we must do. That's where the offense takes place. And to the extent, and there are some people who understand that. One of my dear friends, Rania Patrice, she understands that, but there are a lot of people, and I think others are making mischief. Some of these things might be bots, trying to stir up tension between Arab Americans and the Black community. What I would say is that the struggle is similar. And when you are a humanist, I mean, I call myself a hell-raising humanitarian. I'm not going to enumerate how many times you come out. Now, I want you there when I'm struggling. But if I got to enumerate how many times you come, then I got to question whether or not I'm a humanitarian. The suffering over in the Gaza, the hostages that were taken on October 7th, the people that were killed on October 7th. You know, Congresswoman Tlaib and I both said similar things in terms of an Israeli baby crying and a Palestinian baby crying. You can't tell the difference between their cries. People who are enlightened in this particular movement, because people have asked me, you know, S&T, why are you fighting so hard? You ain't got no relatives over there. They don't fight as hard for us. And what I say is that I am not going to base my recognition of somebody else's humanity on how hard they fight for me. There is a however, though. There has to be a collective consciousness awakening among people of color, among marginalized people, to understand that the Black community has a unique struggle in this country. And I'm talking about Black Americans who are descendant. I gotta say this because the ADOS movement is very important because not all Black people have the same experience. I'm talking about Black Americans who are foundational to this country, or other words, Black Americans whose ancestors were chattel slaves. I think people take that for granted. And they don't love Black people as much as we love humanity. It doesn't make us a perfect people, but Black people are usually on the front lines for most marginalized groups.
But I feel like it's so much worse because I feel like all these other marginalized groups steal valor from the ADOS community. Yeah. Like they use like the Americans descended from slaves and the Black struggle, whether it's, you know, and you see each group like coming up and saying, now it's our turn. And the Democratic Party, I'm sorry, getting totally sidetracked by this stolen valor, and each time they move from one thing to the next, and it's so frustrating.
And that's why I don't like that identity. I totally agree with you. Reparations. I want to hear the vice president. I wrote, Newsweek.
Yes.
My editor right here. We need a black agenda. And part of that black agenda is reparations. So definitely I'm miffed when President Obama, basically said, he's not the president for black people. I think Vice President Harris has been asked similar questions even before she started running for the presidency. You cannot, in the United States of America, say that you are for true freedom and liberation without recognizing the harm generationally, even to this day, that has been done to black descendants of enslaved people. Let me take Black Wall Street, for example. You both know there were 4 elders alive, all over the age of 100. 2 of them have died. They went before Congress. All they got was pats on the back and atta girl, atta boy, and so sorry you went through that. Now, if you can't look into the eyes of those elders who were children at the time that a white mob came and destroyed their community, burnt it down, stole their stuff, if you cannot say that they deserve reparations, then how else are we gonna get there? Congress did absolutely nothing for them and sent them on the way. 2 have died since. 2 are still alive, and they're still fighting to get reparations for themselves and for their descendants. So absolutely, other groups of color and marginalized groups are gonna have to come to grips with the black liberation struggle and not tell black people we need to wait. And it is offensive, and the black community is very much offended. And I'm generally speaking about the black community too.
Nina Turner, I would never tell you to shut up.
I appreciate that.
I'm slightly terrified of you.
That person would not do that in my face.
Yeah, because I wouldn't do it on Twitter either, because I would also be afraid of you there too.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you coming out and watching Tim Walz's speech with us, and we appreciate you watching. Lots of you out there. We're going to be back tomorrow for the final night and another marathon session of Free Press Live. Thank you, Batya. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a good night.